My name is Carolyn Fisher, and I'm an artist and an author. For my job, I illustrate and write books for kids. Some of the books I've made have been these.
Two gardening books, a goodnight book, a snow book, a tornado book, a book about cells, a book about feet. Sometimes I go to school to show kids how to write and illustrate books. When I'm at school, I often draw on the spot portraits, like this, and this, and these. During the quarantine, I miss making drawings of kids at school. So I thought I'd call up a sixth grader I know to see if I could draw his portrait, social distance style.
Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Can you be the model for a social distance portrait?
Yeah, I can.
So you have to sit perfectly still without moving a muscle for about 15 minutes. Can you do that?
I think so.
Great. Let's get started.
Before I called up Kieran, I had pre-painted a tone on my paper and let it dry. This very first coat of paint on my paper is called a ground. Artists use colored grounds to save a step and sometimes to seal the paper or canvas. A ground can be any color. Often, artists will let a colored ground shine through in the final drawing or painting. I like to draw and write in drafts. A draft is a version or iteration of your creative work. For my first draft of a drawing, I use a light colored pencil. Then I'll draw another draft in a darker color right on top, fixing any little mistakes I might have made. I often leave my mistake lines in the drawing. I don't use an eraser because I like the way that the different colored lines give energy to my drawing and tell the story of how my colored pencils traveled over the page. Sometimes I listen to audiobooks when I'm drawing, and sometimes I listen to music. I think I'll put on some music now. I've drawn Kieran's head and shoulders now. I used an orange colored pencil for my first draft. Then I drew a draft in tan colored pencil right on top of my orange drawing, fixing any little mistakes I might have made. Then I drew drafts in brown and blue and red to fix up and add detail to parts of the drawing. I'm ready to work on the background now. I like my drawings to be loose and scribbly, so I'm going to add some scribbles with a red pencil crayon. Then I'll get out my chalk pastels and add some texture with orange and blue. Now I'm ready for a little orange paint. I'm going to use a dry brush technique, which means my brush won't be very wet. I'll dip the brush in water, then I'll get the excess water off the brush by wiping it on a scrap of paper. I'll load up the brush with orange paint and then drag it across the paper. When I use dry brush, my brush skips and streaks a little bit. Dry brush lets that color of the ground peek through. Now I'm ready for some blue paint. This is acrylic, but I could have used tempera. I'm going to use that dry brush technique again, which will let the ground color peek through. I like to use a stiff bristle brush for these streaky dry brush strokes. If I was making watercolor washes, I would use a soft brush.
And I'm done. So I'm going to take this picture and I'm going to show it to my model. That's my social distance portrait of Kieran, and I could mail it to him, but he actually lives with me, so I'm just going to give it to him. Now go get your colored pencils and paints and paper and go draw your social distance portrait. Just to remind you how I did it. Paint a colored ground on your paper. Get your model set up, whether it's somebody in your house or over Zoom. Draw in drafts. Use a light colored pencil first, then draw another draft in darker colored pencil right on top, fixing any little mistakes. Don't erase. Use pastel to make a scribble texture. Use dry brush to paint the background. And that's it. When you're done, get your grown-up to email or tag me with a photo of your social distance portrait on social media. Thanks to the Young Alberta Book Society who brought us this video. When we're not in quarantine, YABS brings authors, illustrators, and storytellers together with kids in Alberta schools and libraries. We're grateful to them for connecting us by video when we're all at home. Thanks, YABS. And thanks, kids.